The air in our childhood home always carried the faint, sweet scent of my mother's lavender polish, a smell that clung to the old wooden furniture long after she was gone. Today, it was buried under the sharp, anxious aroma of burnt coffee and the cloying sweetness of my sister Clara's peach-scented lotion. I, Elena, stood at the sink, the cool porcelain a relief against my palms as I stared out the window at the rain-slicked street. Each drop of water traced a shimmering path down the glass, distorting the world outside into a blur of gray and green. I could feel the low, grumbling pressure of the storm in my bones, a physical ache of impending doom. "You're quiet today," my father's voice rumbled from the kitchen table. The sound of his newspaper, a dry, rustling whisper, was as familiar as my own heartbeat. I could hear the slight wheeze in his breath, a recent and worrying development. "Just thinking, Dad," I said, turning to offer him a smile that felt as fragile as the antique china in the cabinet behind him. The light in the room was a dim, yellowed thing, cast by a single brass fixture overhead, and it painted everything in shades of nostalgia and melancholy. The front door slammed open, a crack of thunder that made us both jump. Clara stood there, drenched, her chest heaving. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her dark hair onto the polished floorboards, creating tiny, dark pools. Her face, usually a mask of carefully constructed composure, was a landscape of pure panic. Her eyes, the same shade of hazel as mine, were wide and swimming with tears. "Dad," she gasped, her voice a ragged sob. "It's gone. Grandma's brooch. The emerald one. I went to wear it for the Daniels' dinner tonight and it's gone from my jewelry box." The air in the room solidified, becoming thick and difficult to breathe. That brooch was not just a piece of jewelry, it was a relic, a tangible piece of our mother's mother, a woman whose strength was the bedrock of our family lore. Its loss was unthinkable. My father stood, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that grated on my nerves. "What do you mean, gone? Did you misplace it, Clara? Check again." "I've turned my room upside down," she cried, her hands fluttering in the air like distressed birds. "It's nowhere. And the only other person who's been in my room this week is Elena." All the air left my lungs. The accusation hung in the lavender and peach-scented air, so absurd I almost laughed. But the look on my father's face stopped me. It wasn't laughter I saw there, it was a flicker of doubt, a shadow of suspicion that darkened his kind eyes. "Clara, that's ridiculous," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the frantic drumming of my heart. "Why would I take it? Why does anyone take anything, Elena?" she shot back, her tears now flowing freely. She took a step toward me, and I could smell the rain on her coat, a cold, metallic scent. "You've been so stressed about money since you lost your job. You've been talking about how you can't afford your rent. That brooch is worth thousands." It was true, my financial situation was a constant, gnawing worry in the pit of my stomach. But her words were like shards of glass, each one finding its mark. She was twisting my vulnerability, my shared fears with my father, into a weapon. "I would never," I whispered, the words thick with hurt. I looked at my father. "Dad, you know I wouldn't." He looked from my pleading face to Clara's tragic one. His shoulders, usually so square and strong, slumped in defeat. "Elena," he said, his voice heavy with a pain I had never heard directed at me before. "Your sister is upset. We all are. But if you know something, if you took it to pawn it or, just to scare her, now is the time to tell the truth." The betrayal was a physical blow. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, a stark contrast to the cold dread settling in my stomach. Clara had always been the dramatic one, the one who commanded attention, but this was a new level of cruelty. I saw it then, a tiny, almost imperceptible glint of triumph in her wet eyes, gone so fast I questioned if I'd imagined it. "I didn't take the brooch," I stated, each word measured and clear. "I have nothing more to say." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my legs feeling numb and foreign. The familiar creak of the third stair under my foot sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence I left behind. I fled to my old room, the one that still held the ghosts of my teenage self, and collapsed on the bed, the rough texture of the chenille bedspread scratching against my skin. The sound of their hushed, urgent voices drifted up from below, a low, ominous hum that promised my world was about to shatter. The days that followed were a slow, excruciating unraveling. The lavender polish smell in the house was now permanently tainted with the bitter odor of distrust. Clara performed her grief like a seasoned actress, her sobs echoing through the halls at carefully chosen moments. She would clutch my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and whisper, "Just give it back, Elena. No one will be angry. We'll help you with your money problems," her breath warm and cloying against my ear. My father's eyes followed me everywhere, filled with a disappointment so profound it felt like a constant weight on my chest. He stopped asking me to set the table for dinner. He no longer called out, "Good night, sweetheart," from his bedroom door. The silence from him was louder than any shouting could have been. The breaking point came 1 week later. Clara, in a theatrical flourish, announced she had no choice. She had to file a police report for the insurance. She looked at me, her face a mask of pained resolve, and said, "I'm so sorry it's come to this, Elena. But it's a family heirloom. It has to be done." I said nothing. I just watched her, this stranger who shared my blood, and felt a cold, hard stone of resolve form in my own gut. The police officer was a young, tired-looking man who smelled faintly of stale coffee and rain. He took Clara's statement, his eyes flicking to me occasionally with impersonal curiosity. I gave my own simple, unwavering denial. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. A week after that, a formal summons arrived. Clara was pressing charges. The family conflict was now a legal one. The paper felt cold and official in my hands, the words, "grand larceny," swimming before my eyes. My father stood by, his face ashen, and said the words that would haunt me for months. "Maybe this is for the best, Elena. The court will get to the truth. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear." He didn't say he believed I was innocent. He said if I was innocent. That single, two-letter word carved a canyon between us. The months of preparation for the trial were a special kind of hell. My savings, meager as they were devoured by a court-appointed lawyer who seemed more interested in a quick plea deal than the truth. My friends, who were also Clara's friends, drifted away, their loyalties silently shifting. I was alone in a way I had never been before, adrift in a cold, gray sea of accusation. I spent my days in my small, dingy apartment, the constant hum of the refrigerator my only companion, the world outside my window feeling distant and hostile. The morning of the trial dawned bright and unforgiving. The sun streamed into my apartment, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, carefree thing I could no longer be. I dressed in a simple, navy blue dress, my hands trembling so violently I could barely button it. The fabric felt rough and cheap against my skin. The courthouse was a monument to intimidation. Its high, vaulted ceilings echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps and low, serious conversations. The air was cold, carrying the scent of old books, floor wax, and a faint, metallic tang from the radiators. The wooden benches in the hallway were hard and unforgiving, worn smooth by generations of anxious waiting. I saw them then, my family. My father, looking older and more shrunken than I remembered, in a stiff, unfamiliar suit. And Clara, clinging to his arm, wearing a simple, cream-colored dress that screamed innocence and virtue. Her eyes met mine for a split second, and in them, I saw not a flicker of sisterly love, but the cold, hard gleam of a predator who had cornered her prey. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, yet the gravity within its walls was immense. The judge sat high above us, a serious-faced woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her black robe seemed to absorb the light in the room. The jury, a panel of strangers, stared at us with open curiosity, their faces a blur of neutral judgment. The trial began. The prosecutor, a man with a voice like grinding gravel, painted a picture of a desperate, jealous younger sister, driven by financial ruin to steal a precious family treasure. He called Clara to the stand. She was magnificent. Her voice trembled with just the right amount of emotion. She spoke of her close relationship with our mother, of the sacred trust of inheriting the brooch, of her devastation upon discovering it was missing. She cried, delicate, perfect tears that traced paths down her cheeks without smudging her makeup. She looked at the jury, her gaze wide and sincere, and when she pointed a trembling finger at me, saying, she was the only one with the opportunity. She was in my room the day before I noticed it was gone. I felt the collective gaze of the room shift to me, heavy with condemnation. Then, it was my lawyer's turn for cross-examination. He was hesitant, almost apologetic. He asked soft, meandering questions that Clara batted away with practiced ease. My heart sank into my shoes. This was it. I was going to be convicted. I was going to lose everything because of my sister's beautiful, brutal lie. And then, something shifted. The judge, a woman named Judge Wilkins, had been watching the proceedings with an unnerving stillness. Her eyes, intelligent and perceptive, had rarely left Clara's face. She had not been scribbling notes like the others, she had been listening, truly listening. As my lawyer fumbled through a question about the jewelry box, Judge Wilkins raised a hand, silencing him. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, clear, and cut through the stuffy air of the courtroom like a shard of ice. "Miss Clara," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I have a question, if you don't mind. You stated that the brooch was a direct inheritance from your maternal grandmother, is that correct?" Clara, looking pleasantly surprised by the judge's interest, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. It was left specifically to me." "And you kept it in your personal jewelry box, in your bedroom, at your father's residence?" "That's correct." Judge Wilkins steepled her fingers. "You described the brooch in your testimony. A gold filigree setting, with a central emerald approximately the size of a marble, flanked by two smaller diamonds. You stated it was priceless to you. Yes, Clara said, her voice dripping with sentimental conviction. It's irreplaceable. Indeed, the judge murmured. She then picked up a document from her desk. The court has been provided with a copy of your mother's last will and testament, as part of the evidence submitted to establish provenance. I've taken the liberty of reviewing it. A faint line appeared between Clara's perfectly sculpted brows. Okay. The judge's gaze was unwavering. The will states, and I quote, I bequeath my emerald and diamond brooch to my daughter, Elena. She looked up from the document, her eyes locking with Clara's. It makes no mention of you, Miss Clara. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The air grew thick, charged with a sudden, electric tension. I felt my own jaw go slack. The brooch was left to me? My mother had left it to me? Clara's face went through a rapid, terrifying series of transformations. First, confusion. Then, dawning comprehension. Then, sheer, unadulterated panic. The mask of the victim shattered, revealing the frantic liar beneath. That must be a mistake, she stammered, her voice losing its melodic quality, becoming shrill. A typo. My mother always told me it was meant for me. She told me. Did she? Judge Wilkins's voice was dangerously quiet. Because according to the official probate records, this brooch was never part of your mother's estate at all. It was part of your paternal grandmother's collection. And your father's affidavit, submitted to this court, confirms that his mother's will specified the brooch was to be held in trust by him until his younger daughter, Elena, turned 25. She paused, letting the weight of her words crush the remains of Clara's story into dust. You are 27, Miss Clara. Elena is 23. The brooch was not yours to report stolen. It was, in fact, legally your sister's property all along. The room erupted in a wave of gasps and murmurs. My head was spinning. The brooch was mine. My father had been holding it for me. He'd never told me. He'd let Clara wear it, cherish it, believe it was hers. But Judge Wilkins was not finished. She turned her piercing gaze toward my father, who had shrunk in his seat, his face a ghastly shade of gray. Mr. Evans, she said, her tone now laced with a cold, judicial steel. Would you care to explain to this court why you allowed this charade to continue? You were aware of the terms of the will. You were served with the subpoena for these very documents. You sat in this courtroom and listened to your one daughter falsely accuse the other of stealing her own property. And you said nothing. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had been gutted. The truth was a physical presence in the room, ugly and undeniable. Clara hadn't just lied about the theft. She had built her entire narrative on a foundation she knew was shaky, banking on sentimentality and my father's silence. And my father, he had chosen to protect the lie, to preserve Clara's fantasy, even at the cost of my reputation and my freedom. The judge's voice cut through the chaos, firm and absolute. The case against Elena Evans is dismissed with prejudice. The real victim of a false accusation is sitting at the defense table. She then looked at Clara, her expression one of utter contempt. As for you, Ms. Evans, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for a full investigation into charges of perjury and filing a false police report. This court is adjourned. The gavel cracked down, a sound of finality that echoed the shattering of my family. The aftermath in the courtroom was a silent film of devastation. The moment the judge's gavel fell, the carefully constructed performance was over, leaving only the raw, ugly truth exposed. Clara did not look at me. She stared straight ahead, her body rigid, her face a frozen mask of shock and terror. The perfect tears were gone, replaced by a dry, wide-eyed horror. The creamy dress that had symbolized innocence now seemed like a pathetic costume. A uniformed bailiff moved to her side, his presence a dark promise of the consequences now descending upon her. My father stumbled to his feet, his hand reaching out as if to stop the inevitable, but no words left his lips. The sound of his choked sob, a wet, broken thing, was the only noise he made. He looked at me then, finally, and the sheer, agonizing shame in his eyes was more than I could bear. It was a confession louder than any he could have spoken. He had known. He had always known, and he had let me drown. My court-appointed lawyer, suddenly energized by the dramatic turn, patted my shoulder awkwardly. You're free to go, Ms. Evans. A remarkable turn of events. He gathered his papers and hurried away, leaving me alone in the swirling vortex of the courtroom. I stood up, my legs feeling weak and boneless. The wooden floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I walked out of the courtroom, through the heavy double doors, and into the bright, impersonal hallway. The sunlight streaming through the high windows felt alien and harsh, a stark contrast to the emotional darkness I had just escaped. I didn't wait for them. I just started walking, my heels clicking a frantic, disjointed rhythm on the polished marble floor. I needed air. I pushed through the main doors and descended the wide courthouse steps, the warm, city-smelling breeze hitting my face like a slap. I stopped on the sidewalk, leaning against a cold, rough stone wall, and finally let out a breath I felt I had been holding for months. It was a ragged, shuddering thing that turned into a dry, heaving sob. There were no tears, not yet. Just a vast, hollowed-out feeling, as if my very soul had been scooped out. I heard my name, a broken whisper behind me. I turned. My father stood there, his suit jacket wrinkled, his tie askew. He looked decades older than he had just an hour ago. "Elena," he began, his voice cracking. "My God, Elena. I don't know what to say." The dam of my numbness broke. "You knew," I said, the words flat and cold. "You knew the brooch was mine. You knew it the whole time. You watched her accuse me. You watched me hire a lawyer, you watched me lose sleep, you watched everyone look at me like I was a thief. You sat in that room and you said nothing." He flinched as if I had struck him. "It was complicated. Clara, after your mother died, she became so attached to it. She believed it was meant for her. Your mother had let her wear it sometimes. I thought it was a harmless fiction. I never imagined it would come to this. I thought if I just stayed quiet, it would all blow over. I thought she would eventually drop the charges. I never thought the judge would." "You never thought," I repeated, the bitterness rising in my throat like bile. "That's the problem, Dad. You never thought about me. You only thought about protecting her, about keeping her happy, even when her happiness was built on a lie that was destroying me." Tears finally welled in his eyes, spilling over and tracing paths through his stubble. "I am so sorry. I was a coward. I see that now. Please, come home. We can fix this. We can be a family again." The word family felt like a foreign language. I looked at this man, my hero, my rock, and I saw a stranger. The trust between us wasn't just broken, it had been systematically dismantled, brick by brick, over the past few months, and the final blow had been his silence in that courtroom. "There is no family," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not after this. You made your choice, Dad. You chose her. You have to live with that." I turned and walked away from him. I didn't look back. I heard him call my name once more, a desperate, fading sound swallowed by the city's noise, but I kept walking. Each step away from the courthouse, away from him, felt like a step toward a new, uncertain, but self-owned future. The legal proceedings against Clara moved quickly. She was charged with multiple counts of perjury and falsifying evidence. Faced with the overwhelming proof, her defiance crumbled, and she accepted a plea deal that involved probation, community service, and a permanent mark on her record. She never contacted me to apologize. I heard through the brittle, broken grapevine of what was left of our social circle that she had moved to another state, fleeing the wreckage of her own making. My father tried. For weeks, he called. He sent letters, long, rambling apologies filled with self-recrimination and pleas for forgiveness. I read the first one. The words "I failed you" were written over and over again. But the words were just ink on paper. They couldn't erase the memory of his face in that courtroom, the silent complicity that had nearly cost me everything. I stopped reading them. I changed my phone number. The connection had been severed, and I felt no urge to suture it back together. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the trial, when a small, heavy package arrived at my new apartment, a bright, airy place I was slowly making my own. The return address was my father's lawyer. With trembling fingers, I opened the cardboard box. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was the brooch. The emerald was even more stunning than I remembered. In the soft light of my living room, it glowed with a deep, inner fire, the 2 flanking diamonds winking like captured stars. The gold filigree was intricate and delicate under my fingertips. This was the object that had started the war. This small, beautiful thing had revealed the ugliest truths about the people I loved most. I held it in my palm, feeling its cool, substantial weight. It was no longer a symbol of my mother or my grandmother. It was a trophy from a battle I never wanted to fight. It was a reminder of the cost of truth and the price of my freedom. I didn't put it in a jewelry box. I placed it on my mantelpiece, where the light could catch it. It was not a treasure to be hidden away, but a monument. A monument to the day the lies ended, the day the judge saw through the performance and showed everyone, including me, who the real victim was. It was a cold, beautiful, and hard-won prize for surviving the collapse of my own family. And as I looked at it, I felt not the warmth of inheritance, but the solid, unyielding strength of my own resilience. I was no longer Clara's sister, or my father's victim. I was just Elena. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough.